Frelix 9 was a dead planet. It was not always like this. Once long ago, it had trees and rivers. Now it was only garbage. Mountains of metal, broken machines, chemical waste, and forgotten things covered the land. The sky was always gray. The air smelled like burning oil and rot. No one came here unless they had to. No one stayed unless they were desperate. The aliens who lived here now were scavengers, traders, thieves. Most of them were Scifi, a thin, insect-like race with long arms and wide black eyes. They wore rebreather masks and lived in shelters made from old starship parts. They had no army, no police, only rules made by the strongest gangs. In the middle of one loud and dusty day, the ground shook. A garbage mountain, one of the largest in Zone 13, collapsed in a loud thunder of metal and ash. Screams filled the air. Fire started. Toxic smoke covered everything. Kazari, a small Scifi mother, was the first to run toward the falling pile. She was thin and fast, her claws clicking against the metal ground. Her daughter Tylan had been playing nearby. "No, no, no," Kazari cried, climbing the edge of the wreckage. She screamed the child's name over and over. "Tylan, can you hear me?" No answer, only the sound of crackling fires and shifting metal. Other Scifi came, but they only stood and watched. One shrugged. Another said, "She's gone." A third said, "Not worth it. Too deep." Kazari turned to them with anger in her voice. "Help me. We have to dig her out." But no one moved. To them, life was cheap here. One more child lost was nothing new. She was already counted as dead. Kazari trembled, her claws shaking. She opened her comlink, her hands moving fast. She sent a message out to the local salvage channel. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Human. Please save my daughter from under the garbage pile? Please." There was silence for a few seconds. Then one voice answered, "I'm on my way." His name was Rick Dalton, human, former soldier. Now, a scavenger for hire. Everyone on Frelix 9 called him crazy. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. Most alien species thought humans were dangerous and unstable. They came from a death world full of monsters, poison, and fire. And yet humans survived. No humans thrived. Rick lived alone in a small container camp on the edge of Zone 13. When he got the message, didn't ask questions. Grabbed his gear. He strapped on his exosutan old Earth-made power rig with scratched metal arms and hydraulic legs. He checked his oxygen tank, lifted a thermal spade, and started walking toward the danger. Scifi watched him as he passed. Some laughed. That human's going to die. But Rick didn't stop. He moved with purpose, fast and silent. He reached the collapsed garbage pile and saw Kazari standing there, eyes full of fear and hope. She looked tiny beside the human in armor. "She's in there," she whispered. "Somewhere under the big black plate. I heard her scream once, then nothing." Rick nodded. He said only one word. "Got it." Then he walked forward into the smoke. The garbage mountain was unstable. Every step made something shift. A rusted engine rolled down the slope. A loose beam cracked and fell. The heat inside was rising. Poisonous gas hissed out of broken barrels. Rick activated his visor. His screen showed temperature, air quality, and movement. He scanned the wreckage. Somewhere below, a small life sign blinked quick, but real. She was alive. Rick started to dig. He moved fast, clearing broken panels and loose metal. His hands were cut, but he didn't stop. The deeper he went, the hotter it became. The spade in his hand glowed from use. Minutes turned into an hour. The watchers above began to whisper. "He's still going? No one can survive down there." But Rick kept digging. He remembered another time. A building collapsed back on Earth. His daughter, under the rubble. He had arrived too late that day. This time he wouldn't be too late. The life signal got stronger, he shouted into his cum. "I'm close." A piece of the ceiling groaned above him. Too late, Rick dove to the side as a huge chunk of ship hull crashed down. Dust filled the air. The life signal vanished from his screen. "No," Rick shouted, his voice raw. But then, soft beep. Still alive, faint. He was nearly there. On the surface, Kazari knelt, holding her hands together. The others, Zarethi, watched in silence. Some recorded the moment, their devices blinking. One said quietly, "Why is he doing this?" Another answered, "Because he's human." Below, Rick took a deep breath, spat out blood, and kept digging. He was almost there. The deeper Rick Dalton went, the darker it became. The sunlight above was gone. Only the red glow from his helmet lights guided him now. Metal pipes, plastic sheets, broken machines, and dead batteries surrounded him on all sides. Some parts still burned. Others hissed with leaking gas. But he didn't stop. Couldn't. The child's life signal was still weak, blinking slowly on his visor. She was somewhere down there, buried under layers of junk, heat, and danger. Rick took another step, and the floor under him shifted. A pile of old drone parts slid down, crashing loudly. The sound echoed through the garbage mountain. He steadied himself. "In there, kid," he said softly. "I'm coming." Above, Cesari stood by the edge of the pile, watching the smoke rise. Her claws were pressed together tightly. She said nothing. She had already cried all her tears. Around her, other Zirathis still watched. Some with boredom, some with interest, and some with doubt. "He's been down there too long," one said. "He'll never make it out alive," another added, but one old scavenger, missing an eye and covered in burns, shook his head slowly. "Don't bet against a human," he said. Down below, Rick pushed forward. His suit was starting to break down. Its oxygen supply showed 30% remaining. His left glove was ripped, one of his shoulder plates had fallen off. But he didn't care. He scanned. Again. The signal was clearer now, closer. He moved aside a pile of shredded cables and saw a narrow tunnel ahead, barely big enough for a child. It looked like part of an old ventilation system from a crashed freighter. The signal was coming from inside Rick. Dropped to one knee and peered in. "Tylen," he called. No answer. He turned up the gain on his helmet. Mikan listened. Faint breathing. She was still alive. The tunnel was too small for Rick's suit. He would have to go in without it. He paused. For a second, took a deep breath. Then, without a word, he detached the chest plate, removed his helmet, and pulled off the suit piece by piece. Underneath, he wore a thin survival shirt and pants. His skin was dirty and covered in cuts. He grabbed a small flashlight and crawled into the tunnel. The air inside was hot and thick. Each breath burned. His elbows scraped on the jagged walls. But he kept moving, inch by inch. Finally, after what felt like forever, he saw her. A small Zirathi girl, curled up inside a half-broken stasis pod. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow. One leg was trapped under a beam. Rick's heart jumped. "Hey. Hey, little one," he said gently. Her eyes opened just a little. Scared, confused. He smiled. "It's okay. I'm Rick. I'm human. Your mom sent me." Tear rolled down her cheek. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. "Don't worry. You're safe now," he said. Carefully, he moved the beam. It was heavy, but not impossible. He braced himself and pushed with all his strength. The beam moved just enough. "Tylen," cried out softly. "I know it hurts," Rick said, "but we're getting out." He lifted her gently, wrapping her in a thermal blanket. Then, one arm holding her close, he began to crawl backward through the tunnel. His knees scraped. His back ached. But he didn't stop. Back in the open area under the garbage pile, Rick put her down gently and tapped his comlink. Target found. He said, "She's alive. Sending signal now. Static." He tried again. "Kaziri, do you hear me?" Nothing. The garbage above must have blocked the signal. Rick looked up. There was only one way out, back the way he came. He picked up the girl again and started moving. But now the tunnel behind him had shifted. More debris had fallen. The way was blocked. He looked around quickly. To the left was a narrow side path, filled with broken crates and wires. Dangerous, but maybe passable. He didn't have time to think. Went left. The side path was worse than the first, while every step could be the last. Sharp metal sliced his arms. Steam vents hissed next to his face. His boots slipped on oily surfaces. Tylen whimpered. Rick held her tighter. "It's all right," he whispered. Just a little farther. He reached a broken service door, kicked it open. Light poured in dim, dirty light from the outside. He had made it through. Kazri saw them first. She ran forward, screaming her daughter's name. Rick stumbled out of the smoke, carrying the girl in his arms. His face was black with ash. His clothes were torn. His eyes red, but he was smiling. Kaziri took the child into her arms, crying and whispering, "Thanks." Tylen clung to her. Too weak to speak, other Zarethi stood in silence. No one spoke for a long time. Then the old scavenger stepped forward and said, "The human did it." Another added, "He went in alone and came back." A third said, "He saved her when none of us would." Sari looked up at Rick, tears still falling. I have no words." Rick shrugged. She was under the garbage. Someone had to dig. And then, without asking for thanks or reward, Rick sat down on a rusted crate, took a drink from his water pack, and looked up at the gray sky. He had done what no one else dared, and the whole planet had seen it. News of the humans' rescue spread quickly across FRELLX-9 in the markets. In the scrapyards and in the dark alleys where deals were made, everyone was talking about the same thing. The humans saved a Zarethi child alone. Into the burning pile and came back. Maybe humans aren't as wild as we thought. Some were impressed, others were shocked, but not everyone was happy. High above the garbage zones, in a rusted command tower made from crashed ships, the Zarethi Council gathered. 5 old Zarethi leaders sat in curved chairs. Watching a playback of the rescue on a dusty holodash screen, the leader counselor Drexel clicked his claws on the metal table. "This is a problem," he said. "A human problem," another hissed. "He humiliated us," Drexel added. "We left the child, called her lost, and now the human is a hero." The council sat in silence. They did not care about the child. They cared about power, about control. And now, one human had made them look weak. In her small metal home, Kaisieri cared about none of that. She was simply happy her daughter was alive. Tylen lay on a sleeping mat, wrapped in clean blankets. Her wounds were treated. Her breathing was steady. She looked up at her mother with tired eyes and whispered, "The human, he saved me." Kazari nodded, brushing her hand gently across her daughter's forehead. "Yes, little star." He did. Outside, Rick stood by the door. His suit was broken. His body was covered in bruises. But he smiled when he saw the girl was safe. Kazari stepped out and bowed her head deeply. "Rick, I owe you everything." Rick shook his head. "You owe me nothing. I just did what was right." But trouble was already coming. That night, as the moons of Frelix 9 rose into the sky, a group of armed Zarethi soldiers came to Kaiseri's door. Their eyes were cold. Their weapons glowed in the dark. "We are from the council," the leader said. "You are charged with spreading dishonor. You begged a human for help. That is betrayal." Kazari stood in front of her daughter. "I would do it again." "Then you are no longer under council protection," the soldier replied. He turned and walked away. No one in the neighborhood spoke. No one helped. Everyone was afraid. But Rick saw it all. Later that night, Rick sat in his small camp, fixing the wires on his broken gauntlet. His fire crackled softly. His eyes were tired but alert. His radio buzzed. "You made the council angry," a voice said. It was Vorin, an old alien merchant who had once traded parts with Rick. He was a watcher, a listener, a man who knew many secrets. "I didn't come here to make friends," Rick replied. "I came to dig. There's more," Vorin said. Some scavenger gangs think you made them look weak. They say you're showing off. Rick laughed. Didn't know saving a kid was showing off. They don't like humans doing things aliens won't. You made them look small. There was a pause. And, Rick asked, and now they want to make you disappear? The next day, Rick went to check on Kayseri and Tylan. Their home was quiet. Too quiet, he knocked once, no answer. He pushed the door open. The place was empty. Everything was gone: blankets, food, tools. Only one word was scratched into the wall with a claw: taken. Rick's eyes narrowed. His hand tightened into a fist. He knew what had happened. The council didn't want them talking. Gangs didn't want heroes. But Rick wasn't about to walk away. He went to the market, found Voren, and leaned in close. "Where are they?" he asked. Voren's eyes darted around nervously. "Rick, don't. You've done enough. If you push more, they'll kill you." Rick didn't blink. "They'll have to try." Voren sighed. "I heard. The council sent them to the East Dump Zone. Old cargo hold tunnels. Dangerous. Toxic." Rick nodded. "Figures." He stood up and walked away. Voren shouted after him, "Why do you care so much? They're not even your kind." Rick stopped, turned slightly. "Because no one else will." Rick geared up again. This time, he wore a patched-up version of his suit. He carried a plasma cutter, a small shield, and his old Earth-issued sidearm. His face was hard, focused. He marched toward the East Dump Zone, a place even other scavengers avoided. The sky was darker there. The ground hissed with chemicals. Machines groaned under their own weight. Strange creatures moved in the shadows, and deep inside, locked behind steel doors. A Syrian Tylan sat in a cage. 2 council guards stood outside. Kayseri held her daughter close. "They will come soon," one guard said. "You will be sent to the Outlands. No one returns from there." Kayseri said nothing, but her eyes were full of fire. She believed Rick was coming. Rick Dalton moved through the East Dump Zone like a shadow. The air was thick with poison. Even his suit's filters whined under the pressure. Fires burned quietly in broken ship husks. Strange creatures hissed from dark corners, but none dared attack him. He was focused. His jaw was tight. His eyes were sharp. He had only one mission: get Kayseri and Tylan out alive. Inside the holding chamber, Kayseri sat beside her daughter. The small cage they were locked in smelled of rust and damp chemicals. Tylan coughed softly, her skin pale. 2 Zarethi guards stood by the door. They wore rebreather masks and held long stun spears. One leaned against the wall, looking bored. The other paced slowly. "They say humans are tough," one said. "But he's just flesh and bone. The scraphounds will eat him before he gets close." Kayseri said nothing. Her eyes never moved from the door. She believed he was coming. Rick reached the outer tunnel. Signal from his scanner beeped. "Life forms ahead, 3 adult-sized." One child. That was them. He scanned the area. There was only one entrance guarded. Thick metal walls. No back door, he whispered to himself. Simple entry. Loud exit. He pulled out a flash charge from his belt and activated it. Soft hum. Started 10 seconds. He stepped into the hallway and threw it toward the guards. The guards looked up. What was? Boom. A flash of white light and thunder shook the chamber. The walls rattled. Sparks flew. The guards collapsed, screaming and blinded. One dropped his weapon. The other tried to stand. But Rick was already there. He moved fast. A punch to the first knocked out cold. A kick to the second down in seconds. Kayseri stared as the smoke cleared. Rick stepped through it like a storm. His armor was scratched. His face was covered in dust. But his voice was calm. "Sorry. I'm late." He cut the lock with his plasma blade and opened the cage. Tylan tried to smile, but coughed again. Kayseri helped her up. "Ready?" Rick nodded. "Stay behind me." They moved out. But the trouble was not over. Alarms began to ring. Somewhere. In the towers above, the Zarethi Council had been warned. He's breaking them out. A guard shouted into a comlink. "The human is here." Counselor Drexel slammed a clawed hand onto the desk. "Send everyone," he yelled. "Gangs, guards, Hunter Z want him buried in the junk." Rick, Kaziri, and Tylan ran through the tunnel system. Rick led the way, cutting through old metal doors and dodging falling pipes. Kaziri carried her daughter tightly, her legs shaking but strong. Suddenly, blaster fire ahead. A group of mercenaries blocked the next exit. 5 of them, armed. Ready, Rick pushed the others back. Stay low. He jumped forward, shield up. The mercenaries fired, but Rick's Earth-made shield took the blasts. He rolled, came up fast, and fired his sidearm dash twice. 2 enemies fell. He slid behind cover, pulled a smoke bomb, and tossed it high. PSSS. HHHHH. Smoke filled the hallway. Through the gray mist, Rick moved like a ghost. By one, the enemies dropped, stunned, knocked out. No killing, just enough to make a point. When the smoke cleared, Rick stood alone. His chest rose and fell, but his hands were steady. Kazari stared again, amazed. You don't stop." Rick gave her a small grin. "You noticed." They reached the outer gate of the zone. Rick opened his comlink and tried to signal for help. Nothing. The area was jamming signals. A broken antenna tower stood nearby, bent, but usable. Rick looked at Kazari. "If I can fix that tower, I can. Call someone in." Kazari nodded. "Do it. We'll hold here." Rick climbed up the tower quickly, toolkit on his belt. Sparks danced in the wind. He reconnected wires, rebooted the panel, and realigned the dish. The tower buzzed, signal back online. Rick opened the channel. "This is Dalton. I need evac for 2-1 injured. Coordinates locked. Send someone fast." Back at the garbage city, the old scavenger Vorin heard the call. He was already warming up his small skimmer craft. "Didn't I tell them not to bet against a human?" he muttered. He took off, flying low and fast, toward the east dump zone. More enemies arrived, council fighters, Kong members with Jung Karmer. Even a few bounty hunters. They surrounded the gate. Rick looked at the small group of defenders, Kaziri, holding her daughter. Hiding behind cover, he turned and faced the attackers alone. One bounty hunter shouted, "Give up, human!" Rick raised his weapon. "Come take her." They rushed. Rick charged. The fight was fast, brutal, and one-sided. Rick fought like a man with fire in his soul. His shield blocked attacks, his punches landed hard, and his every move was precise. The enemy didn't expect resistance like this. He held the line alone. Behind him, Kazari watched, eyes wide. She had never seen anyone fight like that. Then dashed the sound of a ship. Vorin's skimmer dropped out of the sky and landed hard. The hatch opened. Rick shouted, "Go, get in." Kazari ran, carrying Tylan inside. Rick followed, dumping aboard just as blaster fire flew past. The ship lifted off. Rising above the chaos below, the enemy shouted in anger, but it was too late. The human had won. Inside the ship, Tylan opened her eyes and looked up at Rick. "You came back." Rick smiled. "I said I would." Kazari held his arm tightly, tears in her eyes. "You saved us again." Rick looked out the window, toward the garbage world shrinking behind them. "No one deserves to be thrown away," he said softly. "Not on my watch." The skimmer ship sliced through the clouds of Frelix 9 below. The garbage world grew smaller and darker. Inside the ship, silence filled the cabin. It was not fear or sadness, but peace. For the first time in days, Kazari could breathe. She sat near the back with Tylan resting in her arms. The child had fallen asleep, safe and warm. Her weak breathing was steady now. Rick Dalton stood near the front window. His armor was cracked. His body ached from bruises and burns. But his mind was clear. He had saved them. Twice Vorin piloted. The skimmer with calm hands. "You've made a storm, Rick," the old merchant said. "The council's angry. The gangs are furious. But the people, they're waking up." Rick didn't answer. Watched the stars on the horizon. The ship landed at an old outpost on the edge of Frelix 9's orbit. The station was broken in parts, but still had clean air, working beds, and medical supplies. Kaziri placed Tylan in a soft bed. A nurse drone floated over, scanned her, and began healing work. "She'll recover," it said. Needs rest. Kaziria's eyes filled with tears. Then she turned to Rick. I never believed a stranger would care for us, she whispered. But you risked everything. Rick simply said no one else would. A few hours later, a message buzzed on Voron's com-link. He turned it on and listened. His eyes widened. It's starting, he said. He pressed a button. A hologram appeared above the Tabula News broadcast from the inner colonies. The image showed Rick digging through the garbage pile and fighting the mercenaries. Then carrying the girl? The reporter's voice said, on Frelix 9. A human scavenger named Rick Dalton rescued a child from a collapsed trash zone. When the local leaders abandoned her, he acted alone. This sparked protests and conversations. Across the sector, Rick stared at the screen, quiet. Kazari covered her mouth. The image shifted crowds on other planets, waving signs. We are not garbage. Be more like the human. Scifi Council must fall. Voron chuckled. You didn't just save a girl. You lit a fire. Down on Frelix 9, the council was in panic. Their towers were locked down. Protesters filled the scrap streets. Even some guards had laid down their weapons. Councillor Drexel shouted at the screen, his claws shaking. Why is everyone praising a human? He's not one of us. One of his advisors said carefully, but he did what we didn't. He embarrassed us. Drexel growled. Now the people are watching. The council had ruled Frelix 9 for years. But now, fear had entered their voices. Rick sat quietly outside the station, looking at the stars. He wasn't smiling, wasn't celebrating. He had done what was right. But now, everything was changing, and he wasn't sure what came next. Kaiseri walked up beside him. You gave them hope, she said. Rick looked at her. Hope can be dangerous. Sometimes she agreed, but living without it is worse. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Kazari added, Tylan asked for you when she woke up. Rick followed her inside. Tylan looked small under the blanket, but her eyes were brighter. When she saw Rick, she smiled weakly. Human. He sat beside her. Call me Rick. You didn't leave me, she said. No, he said softly, and I never will. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were tiny, but they held on tight. Thank you, she whispered. Rick didn't say anything, but something warm filled his chest. A few days passed. Ships began arriving at the outpost traders, porters, helpers, people who had heard the story, people who wanted change. One trader brought new supplies. Another brought clean water. Young Scifi family asked if they could take some orphan children from the lower zones. All of it started because of Rick and Tylan, and one brave mother who shouted, Human, please save my daughter. One night, Voron handed Rick a small metal box. What's this? Rick asked. Messages, Voron said. Thousands of them. From all over the stars. Rick opened it. Holograms flickered on children waving, families thanking him, aliens. Of all types saying things like, You showed us what bravery looks like. Thank you, human. You are hope. Rick stared at the glowing lights. He never expected any of this. He just wanted to save a little girl from under a trash heap. Later that night, Rick stood again under the stars. Kazi rejoined him. Will you stay? Rick thought for a moment, then shook his head. There's still too much wrong out there. Where will you go? He looked up. Wherever someone needs help. Kaiseri nodded. She didn't argue. Before he left, Tylan gave him a small necklace made of wire and junk beads. It's not pretty, she said, but it's strong. Rick tied it around his wrist. I'll wear it always, said. As Rick's ship left the orbit of Frelix 9, thousands watched from the ground, not just as a hero but as a symbol. Because sometimes, when all others walk away, a human digs through the filth and saves the future. Across the galaxy, stories of Rick's bravery traveled from one planet to another. Space stations, mining colonies, and even wealthy city worlds heard what happened. A single human, wearing battered armor, stood up against powerful aliens, heartless. Councils and junk world gangs all for one little girl, and he won. They didn't know every detail, but they remembered the most important part. The human didn't walk away. That line was repeated on message boards, posters, and protest signs. Some even painted it on walls. when others left you buried. The human dug you out. On Frelix 9, change had finally come. The council had lost much of its power. New voices had risen, brave leaders who believed in justice. The dump. Zones were being cleaned slowly. Sick children were brought to clinics. Food and air supplies were shared more fairly. Kazari had joined a group that helped rebuild broken areas. She became a strong voice for the voiceless, wherever she went. Others listened, and beside her, little Tylan grew healthier each day. She never forgot the man who saved her. She wore a small pin on her shirt, a silver figure holding a shovel, standing on a pile of junk. Her mother asked once why a shovel. Tylan smiled. Because he dug through the filth for me.
It far
away on a dusty moon called Parholland 4. Rick Dalton worked quietly in a forgotten mining village. He didn't tell anyone who he was. He helped fix machines, taught locals how to fight off raiders, and made sure sick children got medicine. But even there, people recognized him. A child pointed and whispered, "Is that him? The man from Frelix?" Rick would shake his head and smile. Just a worker kid. But sometimes, alone at night, he looked at the bracelet Tylan had given him. Worn and simple, made of junk wire and beads. It reminded him what mattered. Not glory, not praise, but doing the right thing when no one else would. One day, a message came. An emergency broadcast from a planet called Verelos. A massive quake had crushed half the city under rubble. People were trapped, and the government had refused to help the lower districts. Rick stood in front of the screen, thinking quietly. Then he picked up his gear, wore his old armor, and started. Walking toward his ship, back on Frelix 9, Kazari watched a similar broadcast. She saw images of people digging with bare hands, begging for help. Tylan sat beside her, now stronger and full of life. Will he go? She asked. Kazari smiled gently. If there's someone crying under the rubble, then yes, Tylan finished. He'll go. And Rick did go. He arrived on Verelos quietly, with no cameras or reporters. He didn't ask for permission. He just started digging. The people were shocked. A stranger, covered in dirt, fighting fire and dust to save strangers. They asked him, "Why are you here?" Simply said, "Because someone's daughter is down there." And then something happened. Others started joining him. An old miner picked up a shovel. A group of young students ran to help. Soon the streets filled with people digging, lifting, saving. It spread like wildfire in one day. The lower city was alive with unity, all because one human refused to walk away. News traveled fast. On planet after planet, more people began standing up against unfair leaders, dirty systems, and those who turned away from suffering. In every crowd, someone always whispered, "The human taught us how." Years later, stories of Rick Dalton were told like legends. Children read picture books about him. Statues of a man with a shovel stood on Frelix 9, Verelos, at Par HELON-4. But no one knew where he went. Some said he disappeared into the stars. Some believed he was still out there, helping quietly, digging others out of darkness. And maybe that was true. Because sometimes, on faraway worlds, in the worst places, someone would cry for help, and a shadow would appear, covered in dirt and fire, and the people would say, "It's him, the human." Back on Frelix 9, an older Tylan stood on a rebuilt platform where her life had once been nearly lost. Children gathered around her. "Tell us the story again," they begged. Tylan smiled and began, "There was a time when no one came. To help? Not the leaders, not the guards, just silence. But then one person appeared, walking through fire and filth. And he heard me cry. He was human, and he dug me out. Because sometimes heroes don't wear golden armor. Sometimes they wear dust, cuts, and a tired smile. Sometimes they dig through garbage just to save one life, and that's enough."